Howard Marks is the sort of person in the finance world who you should be aware of. When he speaks, we listen.
Hey! Listen!
Hello, I'm Howard Marks.
Marks has been writing memos to the clients of Oaktree, his global asset management firm which specialises in alternative investment strategies, for 40 years, and they're full of wisdom to aid any investor. So this is the first video in a series dedicated to these periodic writings of great investors like Marks' memos and Warren Buffett's letters to shareholders. There are a lot of brilliant people sharing a lot of wisdom which is more valuable to you than the YouTubers you see on this platform. Even me. I have put a link in the description to Howard Marks' memo which you really should read. Penned just over 2 weeks ago on the 13th of January, Marks' memo is titled Selling Out. And the timing of this memo is no accident. The S&P 500 is down over 7% in the 2 weeks of trading that followed this memo's publication, and all signs indicate that it could continue to drop as investors continue to sell out. In the memo, Marks describes the act of selling as an inescapable part of the investment process, but he also notes that most investors simply trade too much. Hilariously, Marks points out that there are two main reasons that see investors sell their holdings. Either they're up, or they're down. But both are really illogical when you think about it. It doesn't make any sense to sell shares simply because you are up or down as the only reason. Marks tells of a witty and to the point remark between himself and a friend when discussing how much the Ringe family paid for the entire area of Malibu in 1892. A staggering $300,000 when the collective value in the area today would be worth over billions. His friend remarked how much he would have enjoyed to have bought in at Malibu for $300,000, to which Marks responded critically, "You would have sold it when it got to $600,000. There is a lot of truth in this. Marks used the example of Amazon as a stock to put to readers to challenge them to think honestly about what they would have done. If you had bought in at around $5 at the beginning of 1998, would you have sold it when only 15 months later it was above $100 in April 1999? Or maybe at $50 in May 2000 after there had been sell-offs? You could have held it past May 2000 for 7 years and it would have spent most of that time down. And after this, we can look at any point in time and think honestly, would you have kept those shares? Because if you had bought $10,000 worth of shares at the beginning of 1998, when you were 30 years old, and 15 years later, you're up over $500,000, well, you've done pretty damn well. You could have sold it and taken a huge windfall. But here's where things get really crazy. If you had held that initial $10,000 investment through that and all the huge rises since then to the beginning of this year, you would have been up over $6.5 million. Even after all the recent sell-offs, you're still up over $5.5 million. And no matter what happens in the next few months, long-term investors will probably be well served by holding Amazon because the company's fundamentals really haven't changed in the last 2 weeks, even if interest rates and inflation is rising. And if you buy those shares now, saving nearly 20% from the price at the beginning of the year, and it still goes down, if you're a long-term investor, then this probably doesn't matter. Is the long-term viability of the company something you still believe in? Great, keep buying. So when should you sell?
Sell, sell, sell! Woohoo! $25.
There are a few times where this can make sense. If you're finishing up, that is, you're someone who subscribes to the 4% rule, then selling down will be an obvious and unavoidable part of the strategy. Unless you are a dividend investor who intends to leave all of their shareholdings to their estate at the end of things, then you're going to need to sell your shares at some point because of your lifestyle or stage in life demands it. You might also want to sell because of the opportunity cost. At the end of the day, if you find a better investment and you're confident of that, selling to move funds into that opportunity does make sense.
Yes, thank you. You will get rich quick. We all will.
As Marx says, it's reasonable to reduce or eliminate existing holdings to make room for such opportunities.
If these trends continue.
Finally, it will always make sense to sell if your investment thesis seems less valid.
I would like you to crunch those numbers again.
It's programmed. There's no such thing as
Just crunch them. Just crunch them, please.
crunch.
Did it help?
Here is the tough and all-important point, where things do get a little bit grey. When you make an investment, whether it's an individual share, a bond, property, or even an index fund, you should write down and record the reasons for that decision and review it periodically, and again, write down and record your reasons for holding. This is a small part of your investment thesis, and if that thesis and information seems less valid than it did previously, and or the probability that it will prove accurate has declined, selling some or all of the holding is probably appropriate. So if you look at the investment now and determine the long-term prospects for Amazon are not what you wrote down back in 1998, and you have reviewed that since, well, maybe it makes sense to sell. But just selling because the price is dropping is ludicrous. If you have the excess income and your periodic review of the share affirms your investment thesis, you should be buying.
Shut up and take my money.
As per the usual YouTube standard, guys, if you like this video, please do like, comment, subscribe. As a new channel, we really appreciate your support.